3-day hiking adventure started when we left at 5:15 a.m. July 16, 2010, heading towards northern New Mexico. I went with a friend of mine, Jim. I took my 4-wheel drive Toyota Land Cruiser because I was not sure of the condition of the roads. In the town of Truchas, we went straight on Forest Road 639. You definitely need a 4-wheel drive for this road. Driving it was a fun adventure. We arrived at the trailhead at 8:20 a.m. The starting elevation was 8,950 feet. We started hiking to Hidden Lake at 8:40. It was a beautiful, cool day. I was carrying 33 pounds, including all of our group gear. Towards the end of the hike, we decided to bushwhack up the hill rather than going to Trampas Lakes and then cutting back. If you want ease, do not do this. Keep on the trail. We arrived at the lake at 1 p.m. after hiking 5.1 miles. The elevation of our camp was 11,300 feet. We set up camp just in time. A big thunderstorm blew in. There was rain, thunder, and lightning for about an hour and a half. We sat under a tarp and watched it all. After the rain, we started a fire, cooked steaks, and then went to bed. On day 2, because of the thunderstorms forming almost every afternoon, I wanted to get an early start. We got up at 5 a.m., I got breakfast and coffee ready. Jim had a bout with elevation sickness, headaches, and nausea. He said he was not able to go, yet in a short time he was feeling better and decided to go. We left camp at 7 a.m. with a plan to burn it straight up the hill to Jicarilla Peak. It was a beautiful morning and not a cloud in sight. It was a leg-burning hill climb. We arrived at the peak at 8:20 after going only 3/4 of a mile. The peak elevation was 12,494 feet. We continued the hike along a beautiful ridge, hiking to the top of each little peak along the way, including Peak 12,469. It was one of the most beautiful days of hiking that you could ask for. About 70 degrees, no wind, and incredible views in all directions. We saw a great place for a ridge camp along the way. We arrived at Sheepshead Peak, elevation 12,696 feet at 10:20 after hiking 2.5 miles from the camp. Between North Truchas Peak and Sheepshead Peak is an unmarked peak, 12,900, sometimes listed as 12,880. We decided to do this peak just to make sure we got everything in the area. We went down to the saddle and then up. It was another leg burner. The top was absolutely beautiful. We arrived at 11:45 and ate lunch. It was 3.2 miles from the start. Sometimes when you get to the top of a very cold, windy peak, you're ready to get off right away. But this time it was so perfect, I did not want to get down. We stayed and enjoyed the views for about an hour. We went down off the peak the same way we came, down to the saddle. We came off the ridge by way of a steep, grassy hill over a boulder field, and then went between the 2 Trampas Lakes. The lakes would be a great place to camp right in between them. We saw some bighorn sheep in the area. From there we hiked back to our camp and arrived at 3 p.m. The total trip was 8 hours, including lunch. It was 5.1 miles. I took a small nap, watched some of the afternoon rain sitting under the tarp, lit a campfire, and we had dehydrated meals. I had dehydrated beef teriyaki, and then we went to bed. On day 3, the next morning, I got up at 6:30. We had some breakfast, then we hiked down, leaving at 9:50 a.m. We decided not to bushwhack the same way we came, rather take the whole trail. We headed towards Trampas Lakes. The dividing trail is hard to see. To someone hiking, you need to be watching careful or you'll end up at the lakes rather than going back to the car. It was another beautiful day of hiking. The plants, trees, and wildflowers even more beautiful than before because of the freshness of the rains. We arrived back at the car at 1:30 after hiking a little over 6 miles. The total 3-day hike was 16.2 miles. We had an up-down elevation gain of a little less than a mile, 4,809 feet. Jim soaked his feet in the cold stream and we headed back. We took a different route back, Road 207 to Highway 76 through the mountain town of Truchas and then back home. You do not need a 4-wheel drive for this road. It was a spectacular time of being in God's beautiful creation. When I got back home in the East Mountains of Albuquerque, I heard a bear had been in my trash.
This is July 17th, 2010, and Jim Miller and I have just hiked 3 peaks. Last year, this was the first peak I did. The last Garrett did this is North Truchas Peak. And then Garrett and I went over and we did that one, not the far one. I've done that like 5 times from Boy Scouts, but that little closer one right in the center, that's Medio Truchas Peak. And right there is Middle Truchas Peak. We did that last year. And there almost looks like a golf course. It is just so beautiful. And I'm standing on this peak. It is an unnamed 12,000, they call it 12,900. My GPS says 12,850 feet. We just did this one. This is Sheepshead Peak. That's before this peak that we're standing on. And then we did Jicarilla Peak. Let me get Jim. Wait, Jim. Here's Jim in the video, and he did these 3 peaks. Done super great. Now we are camped right down on the other side. It's called Lost Lake, and it really feels that way. On the other side of that big rock thing there is where we are. That's where we're camped. And we hiked up from way down that valley. You go down that valley and to the left, and we're gonna, in a little bit, we're gonna climb down this and hit the saddle and go to 2 beautiful lakes down here nearby. See if I can show them. So you see one and a part of another. They're the Trampas Lakes. So we're making a big loop. We went all along that ridge. Now, last year, Garrett and I hiked from way down there, way past that rock wall, and we hiked what other people do in 2 days. We did it in one. It was 12 miles. We went all the way up and around this canyon here, all the way to that saddle. And then I decided to do that peak. Garrett did it the last day, and then we went over to Truchas Peaks. And we did this peak on our last day, Chimayosos and Barbara Peak in the distance. Some more beautiful valleys. To me, this is one of the prettiest shots here of the Truchas Peaks. And again, it's just so gorgeous. It almost looks like a golf course with beautiful waterfall down there too. And I'm going to have Jim get a picture of me.
Okay, there we go. There's the peak bagger in person. He dragged me along each of these ridges. He was relentless. He kept telling me that it was just over the next ridge, and we kept bagging him, and then he said, "Jim, you go on."
Anyways, It's been one of the most beautiful days you could have hiking. And God has blessed us with just a wonderful hike.